What if Deku was Aokijis Reincarnation? You guys wanted it, and I am here to deliver. I put up a community poll that basically asked you guys which one of the three admirals should Deku have the Logia powers of. Should it be Kizaru? Should it be Akainu? Should it be I was about to say Kizaru again. No, but Aokiji. Should it be Aokiji? Well, I asked you guys, and it was overwhelming support for Aokiji. So here we are with obviously the what if of the day. Now, this is going to be a multi-part series, and if you guys want to watch the entire thing early, consider becoming a member and getting access to the full movie early before anybody else. That said, if you guys want to enjoy, slap the like button just like with any other video, and with all that out of the way, enjoy.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Alright, where should this what if even start? I know that much like you guys are probably sitting there like, oh, he already has his game plan, but nah, I'm gonna be honest, I decided to just go full like freehand, no script on this video, and I don't even know what I'm about to do. So me and you are both experiencing this what if for the first time. No script this time around, and I'm kind of just gonna be basing most of Izuku's attacks off of everything we've seen from Aokiji, such as Ice Age and his abilities to shoot little lances at people, and turn people into complete statues of ice. I think that that's the dopest part of his powers. But how should he get these powers? Should I just use anime BS and just give him the powers via, you know, anime BSery and basically have it so that just because he's his reincarnation, he gets his powers? Or should I have Izuku end up finding a, you know, Logia devil fruit? Now, there's a couple of ways that I could go about it, but I think that the way that I'm going to be using this time around, just because I kind of don't really feel like creating some convoluted storyline, we're just going to be using the anime BS, alright? So, because Deku is going to be Aokijis reincarnation, let's just say that his soul carries on his powers and that Deku just so happens to inherit it. Now, does this mean he's going to inherit some of Aokijis' personality? Absolutely, of course. Like, this wouldn't be what if Deku had Aokijis powers if it wasn't. But, you know, obviously with that comes Deku being more of a nonchalant person and more of a like just doing what he thinks is right? Like, he's going to be kind of having a little bit of that Kizaru personality mixed in with his own. And when it comes to his hair color, I'm just going to be saying that instead of having that green tint in his hair, I kind of want him to have white hair. So I'm going to be having him take after his father, Hisashi, and he's going to be having white hair in this series just because it's like ice, white hair. Like, I don't know. It just fits. Come on now. We got Elsa, we got Jack Frost, we got, who else is a dude with ice powers that has white hair? Not a lot. But yeah, you guys get the point, right? But regardless of the fact, we basically get an Izuku this time around growing up, not exactly knowing that he has this power, but also knowing that he has something. And eventually, once he gets to the age of 4 years old and he's coherent enough to kind of understand what he's doing and like try to pretty much like use powers or try anything and everything, he would eventually one day when he's about 4 years old end up kind of realizing why it is that he was never able to get into pools and stuff like that. Well, now he finally hit the mark and why he's never been able to really take damage. He finds out that it's because he has ice powers. Always found it strange that wherever Deku went, ice and cold usually followed, and it was always something strange that people weren't able to put 50-50 together with. But now that he's 4 years old, he finally showed the ability to be able to freeze things. When Inko ended up getting home and, you know, she sees Izuku on the counter, she sees Izuku in the living room, right? And Hisashi is there like trying to defrost everything, and Izuku's like, I have ice powers, I have ice powers. Like he's just cheering in excitement, right? But we got Inko walking into the house of, you know, like her nice house, and it's just like it's frozen, and Izuku's just sitting there like cheering, just going absolutely bazonkers because it's like, bro, like froze everything. Like that's kind of cool when you really stop and think about it. But I mean, Inko's not stopping to think about that right now. She just cares about the fact that her whole house got frozen. But regardless of the fact, they take Izuku to the Quirk doctor and they pretty much find out that Izuku has the perfect ice quirk. The only downside is that Izuku can't be submerged underwater, because if he is, he kind of just loses all of his strength and power, And even though he's not going to just die, it is something that is pretty much going to be giving him weakness. Salt water is the thing that mainly affects him. And they end up finding out that if you use like a certain material, you could actually damage Izuku. But with nobody knowing that Sea Prism even exists in this world, there is literally going to be nothing stopping Izuku. Nobody in the My Hero Academia world has Haki, and even though he can take tangible damage unlike many other Logias, the ice can simply reform itself. So Izuku is kind of a god in this series. I'm not even gonna lie to you guys. Imagine having the ability to like just not be hurt unless you have Haki or Sea Prism Stone, which is something nobody's really gonna find out. And he just grows up with Bakugo, and Bakugo always like at the beginning tried to like see if he could beat Izuku and be like, oh, like I'll be better than you when my quirk gets. He finally gets it, and it's like every time that he tried to like defeat Izuku, he just got absolutely mollywopped. Like of course he landed an explosion, but Izuku just reformed it and was like, Bakugo, stop. And Bakugo like could never hurt Izuku. He was never sure why. But eventually he stopped trying to be better than Izuku and just understood that, you know, he's not the best and Izuku is probably gonna be the best. So for their childhood, Izuku was usually the one who would be hit with all the praise, and this would lead Izuku to develop a little bit of a nonchalant, like cocky attitude, where it's like he's kind of like the star player, like where he like doesn't really try for anything unless he really has to, you know what I mean? Like unless he's told, hey dude, start trying, you know what I mean? And so Izuku was always kind of popular at school. He always had all the girls and he always had like all the dudes like wanting to hang out with him and stuff like that. He had all the dudes. But anyways, Izuku basically goes on to live his life just like me and you, right? He goes to school and eventually middle school would come around the corner. Now, once middle school does come around the corner, this is when things slightly begin to change for him, because one day, right, Deku would pretty much be asked by Bakugo if they're gonna hang out today. And Deku would just be like, I'm gonna take a rain check, gotta go hang out with my mom. It's her birthday, right? And you know, he grabs his stuff in his notebook and stuff, and he's still a little bit of a brainiac when it comes to studying people's abilities and how to counter them, but you know, it doesn't really like, you know, matter. But regardless, ladies and gentlemen, we do have Izuku essentially walking over towards the direction of the underground tunnel. And, you know, he's walking, right? And eventually the Sludge villain leeches onto him and it's like, I got you, kid. Give me your body, right? Like he begins to use that strange voice that he has and just like begin telling him that like he didn't know that the freak was in town, aka All Might. And Izuku's like, All Might's in town. Interesting. And, you know, like the Sludge villain was like, what? And it realizes that Izuku's not even there. Like that was a ice clone. And the Sludge villain just looks at Izuku and is like, what are you? And Izuku is practically like still walking away. Now the Sludge villain, before it can realize what's going on, would just be turned to ice. And Izuku would have already turned the corner and walked pretty decent distance away with the Sludge villain just being frozen in ice. All Might would tap it and be like, here? And, you know, he's like, okay, so this is going to be interesting. And now he has to wait for the Sludge villain to melt, but the authorities could take that ice sculpture and imprison him in that state that he was currently in. And Izuku just literally walks home, and there is no altercation that day. He doesn't even get gifted all for one by All Might or anything. I mean, one for all. And All Might essentially ends up having to like continue searching for a successor, and because he's not going to be giving it to Bakugo, because I don't really feel like he deserves it in this what if, I'm just going to be saying that he still just gives it to Mirio just like he would have in the original. And that means that there's going to be two very, very powerful heroes in the series, but Bakugo's never truly going to catch up to Deku's level, no matter how hard he realistically tries. During the 10-month training period, Izuku would kind of just relax, honestly, not train at all. He just goes to school, watches YouTube, he watches Xehther's videos, and he pretty much is just chilling. He's vibing, right? And he just kind of does his thing, right? And eventually the day of the entrance exams would arrive. Now, the day of the entrance exams, Izuku does go, right? Like Inko drops him off and she's like, I love you, right? And Izuku's like, love you too, mom. He walks in, right? And, you know, he takes the test and he's not even muttering this time. He's just looking at present Mike. And Ida just like looks at like Izuku and, you know, like gives him like a strange stare, but Izuku doesn't care. He finishes his test and he walks outside after Ida got called out for being a brainiac. And then after that, he's pretty much just waiting by the back of everybody, just kind of waiting for President Mike to finally announce that they could begin. Izuku gets kind of tired of waiting, and so he decides to go more towards the front of the line. But once he does, this is when Ida would stop him and be like, hey, and Izuku looks back at him and he's like, oh buddy, what's up, what do you want? And Ida's like, you can't go talk to that girl. And Izuku's like, I wasn't going to, but now that you mention it, she is kind of cute. And Ida's like, what do you mean? And Izuku's like, all right, buddy, well, our little chit chat's done. And, you know, Ida just looks at Izuku, and Izuku's just already over by Uraraka talking to her. And he's like, oh, that damn kid, right? Eventually, though, right as Izuku's telling Uraraka his name and stuff like that and introducing himself, President Mike says that the battle can begin, right? Now, immediately, as soon as this starts, Izuku would proceed to essentially like blitz right at the direction of the robots, and as soon as he enters the area with nobody else there, mind you, nobody else is in the vicinity, right? Izuku simply slams his foot down onto the ground and says, Ice Age, as suddenly literally one like half of the literal all the beginning of the robot portion is all covered in ice, the whole thing. Aokiji in the original stopped the whole tsunami, so I think that he could definitely do this with the powers of the Hie no Mi, alright? So Izuku's able to stomp and literally just freeze half of the obstacles that were there. This would lead him to getting hundreds of points, and Nezu and all the teachers alike being absolutely shocked. They've never seen anything like this. Ida and everybody else who was watching it would be like, how did he? And Izuku would like let out like cold air from his breath, right? Like it would be cold, and like half of his face would be covered in ice, but Izuku wouldn't care because it's like he is ice, right? And it's like he finna give Uraraka that icy smile, right? And you know, Uraraka looks at him and she's like, what? And Izuku just looks back at her and he's like, here. And he grabs her by the hand, and bro literally proceeds to use the ultimate Riz and just start like ice skating. He creates ice skates on her feet. And after this, like they begin to skate towards the direction of where everything isn't melted, and they make it over there. And Izuku's like, all right, destroy those robots. And Uraraka just goes in and she like begins to make stuff float, right? And because she was really the only one that does stuff, she actually ends up getting in. Ida obviously began to like run in there as fast as he could and begin trying to destroy robots as much as he could, but it was just hard. And so Izuku and Uraraka were really the only ones that passed that day. Everybody else had to come back 3 days, a week later, because it stayed frozen for a while, right? And after that happens, Ida is just like, all right, don't mess with that kid. And pretty much what ends up happening is Izuku and Uraraka get their acceptance letters, and so does Bakugo, with him saying that he saw how you know, his half of the portion got literally frozen. Izuku is like, yeah, had to show off a little bit. There was a cute girl there. And Bakugo's like, are you serious? You did that because there was a girl? Like, bro, you could have just went in and just destroyed robots single-handedly, like individually. And Izuku's like, that was too much work. I ended up getting about 200 robot points doing what I did anyways. And Bakugo is just like, all right then. I mean, yeah, I mean, I can't really argue with that. I can argue with your methods, but not your results. And so they both continue playing video games at Bakugo's house, and you know, Katsuki's mom is like, Bakugo, get down here or I'll kill you. And Bakugo's like, fuck mom. And you know, he like comes down with Izuku, and Izuku's just there like, hey Miss Katsuki. And she's like, don't call me that, Izuku, you know your family here. And he's like, yeah. He then begins to eat the pasta she makes, and then everybody kind of just ends up passing out. Izuku spends the night at Bakugo's before school starts, and Katsuki would be the one who has his mom actually take them to UA. So they end up arriving around the same time, and Izuku would end up sitting right next to Bakugo, right at the edge of, like literally right at the back of the class. That's where Izuku's at. He has his feet on top of the desk. He like has like a book over his face, and he's just trying to sleep. He's trying to get a nap in, right? And Bakugo just sitting there like cockily just scrolling through his phone until Ida just walks up, and he like just can't stand seeing these two like live their best life, right? And he just walks up and he's like, what are you guys doing? You guys know you're disrespecting UA property? I should do something about this. I can't let you guys do this. You know, he just begins being a whole teacher's pet, right? And immediately Izuku, like, he pretty much like looks at Ida and like he picks the book off of his face and he's like, dude, be quiet. I'm trying to sleep. And, you know, a little bit of ice comes off of his breath. And, you know, he then blows at Ida with his like icy breath. And it like kind of like pushes Ida back, also making the classroom a lot colder than it was before. And this would cue Aizawa to wake up since his temperature was already ruined. Now Aizawa wakes up and he's like, oh, damn it. He then is like, all right, took you guys this many seconds to settle down. And he then pretty much tells the classroom to go get changed into the UA outfits and meet him outside. Everybody does so after a little bit of protest from people asking about UA's orientation, but eventually they all get the memo that Aizawa doesn't care about that kind of stuff. And so they do go on to take the Quirk apprehension test. Now, this I would say would go just like the original, which it does for everybody else except for Izuku and Bakugo, since I'm going to say he's a little stronger since he was trying a lot harder to catch up to him. But, you know, it wouldn't be that much of a monumental difference to make it so like everything changes, right? But it definitely is a significant increase that Aizawa is very, very, you know, proud of and stuff like that. One person that definitely takes note of Izuku's powers is Todoroki. Just watching the way that Izuku moved and the way that he carried himself kind of made Todoroki like kind of think about his older brother, Toya. Or no, not Toya. He didn't have fire. He didn't have ice. He had fire. No, but he just thinks of like his sister. I think his sister has like an ice power, I believe. Yeah, right, maybe. I'm not sure. But regardless, you know, he kind of thinks about that. And Izuku is just kind of there and he's doing his thing and he ends up getting really good markings on everything. I mean, you know, we have the ball throw, and for that, I'm thinking that Izuku's going to be creating like an arrow, like a bow and arrow made out of ice. And like he pulls it back. Wait, it's out of ice. How would he even like pull the thing? Okay, no, he throws the ball up into the air, creates a bat, and then bam, like hits it into the air. And after that, he shoots like lances right at the direction of the ball as it's mid-air, and it just like goes straight through the ball and it like sends it flying even further. After that, Izuku lets everybody else go next, and he gets a worse score than Bakugo at that one just because that's not really his strong suit, throwing things far. But for the 50-meter dash, he pretty much breaks everybody else's records because he's just that fast. And when it comes to his you know, side-to-side stuff, he uses his eyes to just slip off, and it's pretty cool to watch Izuku clear these events. His physical strength and his overall endurance is actually very, very competent, and Aizawa would be very, very proud of the way that Izuku carries himself and how he pretty much uses his abilities to his best ability in each and every Quirk apprehension test. Now, eventually, what would end up happening is that, you know, Aizawa this time around would end up pretty much like being like, all right, nobody's getting expelled. Because even though Mineta doesn't have that much potential, it's kind of there. I mean, he was able to beat Izuku, who actually had an OP quirk, even though, you know, he did break his finger. But, I mean, it's like Mineta stayed in the original, so I don't really want to kick him out because he's just kind of there for comedic purposes. And I think that him and Izuku would kind of make kind of good friends. I'm not going to lie. Just because like Izuku likes women, Mineta likes women. Let's just let those two like them together, right? But basically what ends up happening is Izuku and Mineta like don't hit it off yet, and they don't even really talk to each other, but they do kind of understand their own existence, right? And what ends up happening after this is pretty much that everybody goes home, right? Deku ends up getting picked up by his mom, and Bakugo does so as well. And eventually what ends up pretty much happening following this is a couple of days worth of them all just getting to know each other and kind of understanding their own personal classroom dynamics, such as them being able to kind of, how do I put this? Them being able to kind of like get to know each other and get to know what their likes are, dislikes are, and friend groups individually. Like when you go to a new school and you're kind of trying to get to know who your friends are and like what group you're going to associate with, those are pretty much what the first couple of days are filled with. Eventually though, on the fourth day, what would end up happening is All Might busts in through the classroom and is all like, I am here. And from here, the class just goes absolutely bazonkers, right? Like everybody's like, oh my God, it's All Might, right? And afterwards, you know, he begins to have a cocky smile on his face. Izuku's even a little bit intrigued by him. He's very respectful of All Might. Like he does view him in a very good limelight, right? And All Might is, you know, he's doing his thing. And eventually he ends up pretty much showing the classroom their costumes, which all of them would end up loving, obviously. And once they all look at their costumes and get changed, All Might would pretty much begin to tell the classroom about the heroes versus villains event, and they would all pretty much begin to get ready to do so. Now, when it comes to the heroes versus villain event, I really don't see too much crazy stuff happening here, so I'm just going to be saying that Izuku's still going to... Actually, no, I'm going to put Izuku with Bakugo, just because I don't want to do Bakugo dirty this time around, because he's not the same guy he is in the original. He kind of has a different attitude. He's more like a Kainu, where he like knows he's better, but like he knows he's not better than everyone, right? Like he knows that there's people higher up than him, but he's not going to let anybody lower than him talk down to him, right? Kind of like that, but he's not going to be mean. He's going to be more mellowed out, just because Izuku was there to be like, dude, leave those kids alone, right? And that's kind of just how Bakugo's personality would have changed this time around. But because I want him to fight Todoroki early on, I'm going to have him actually fight Todoroki, and that's going to be pretty interesting to watch. Ice versus Ice. And who does Todoroki get paired with? I'm pretty sure that Todoroki in the original gets paired with Invisible Girl, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe Momo. But regardless of who he gets paired with, that team's gonna lose. It's not even a question. It's amazing the way that it happens. Like, I'm not even gonna sugarcoat this. Izuku, the second that the battle begins, would be like, Bakugo, I'm gonna tell you this right now. You're gonna get 1 minute of having fun and trying to fight them before I freeze the whole place. And Bakugo would look at him and say, dude, just freeze the place. I'm not trying to be in there when it's all covered in ice. And Izuku's like, all right. So he stomps his foot, and the entire building, including the bomb, Todoroki, and his teammate, would all be frozen solid. Izuku then creates some icy stairs and walks up them, making his way directly to the bomb room. And what ends up happening here is he just walks to the bomb, and he's like, all right, now I guess I got to... As he like begins like getting closer to it and beginning to try to touch it, and Todoroki inside of the ice would begin using as fire to begin melting the ice on himself. And right as he's finished melting the ice on himself, Izuku looks at Todoroki and he's like, yo, you think you could melt this thing? I'm having a hard time grabbing him. But Todoroki shoots an ice pillar at him, and Izuku dodges out of the way, appearing in front of Todoroki as he's like, that wasn't very nice. He then says, he then freezes him in a thicker layer of ice, because the layer that he had around himself was very thin, just because he didn't want to like hurt Todoroki. But he completely freezes Todoroki in a cube and cage of ice that Todoroki is just stuck in, as like his whole facial expression is just like, what? And Deku just freezes him as he walks over towards the bomb and begins chipping away at it, as All Might just screams, "Hero team wins!"